Have you ever worked yourself to the bone, built something from nothing, and still been the one person in the room your own family refused to believe in? Because that was my entire life. Until one night, in front of everyone who had ever laughed at me, I finally made them understand exactly who they had been underestimating. My name is Aaron Briggs. I'm 29 years old. And this is the story of how my father's cruelty became the foundation of everything I built. My dad turned 58 on a Saturday in April. The party was in the backyard of the house I grew up in, the same house where I had spent most of my childhood feeling like the wrong answer to a question nobody wanted to ask. There were fairy lights strung between the oak trees, a folding table full of food my aunt had spent 2 days cooking, and about 30 people milling around with drinks, laughing too loud the way people do when they've had just enough to forget their manners. I arrived at 6, already tense. I had learned over the years to arrive with my guard up at family gatherings. Not because I was looking for trouble, but because trouble had a habit of finding me at these things. I came in through the side gate, and I heard them before I saw them. My dad was standing near the far end of the yard with my 2 older brothers. Callum, who was 34 and ran a mid-sized logistics company, and Derek, who was 32 and worked in commercial real estate. They were all holding whiskey glasses, the way they always did when they were feeling comfortable and superior. I heard my dad laugh first. That specific laugh. Low, satisfied like he had just said something clever. Then I heard my name. Aaron? My dad said, still chuckling. Give it 6 months. He'll fold and come begging for a real job. Callum raised his glass. I'll give him 4. Derek grinned. I'll say $300 says he's working under one of us by Christmas. Then my dad said the line that stopped everything inside me. He was never built to succeed. I stood completely still behind the gate. My hand was still on the latch. The fairy lights buzzed softly above the yard. Someone across the garden was laughing at something else entirely, and the sound felt very far away. Then Callum turned his head and saw me. The laughter didn't stop immediately. It sort of tapered off like a radio being turned down slowly. Derek saw me next. Then my dad turned around. I waited. I genuinely waited for something. An awkward laugh, a subject change, maybe just the basic human instinct to look embarrassed when you've been caught saying something cruel about your own child. Instead, my father looked at me, raised his glass slightly and said, "You heard that, did you?" "I did," I said. He shrugged. "Well, it's true, son." The whole backyard had gone quiet. 28 people were now looking at me, waiting to see what I would do. I smiled. That was the only weapon I had right then, so I used it. "Happy birthday, Dad," I said. And I walked into the yard like nothing had happened. But Callum wasn't finished. He followed me to the drinks table with that slow, confident walk he had. The walk of someone who had never in his life doubted his own position in a room. He asked loudly, right next to my Aunt Carol, how much money I had left in the business account. He said it pleasantly, like it was just conversation. "Still pretending to be an entrepreneur?" he said, picking up a bottle of sparkling water. "Or is that officially over now?" "Still going," I said. "Rent covered this month?" he said. "Or is it getting creative over there?" My Aunt Carol visibly winced. She looked at her shoes. Then my dad appeared again, this time with an envelope. He held it out to me in front of at least 10 people. Relatives, neighbors, my dad's work colleagues. "Here," he said. "In case things are tight. No shame in it." It was cash. Emergency cash. Offered the way you'd offer coins to someone sitting on a street corner. I looked at the envelope. I looked at my dad's face. There was no genuine concern in it, just the quiet satisfaction of a man who wanted everyone present to understand exactly where I stood in the family hierarchy. "I'm fine," I said. "Thank you." "Take it," he said. "I don't need it." He shrugged and pulled the envelope back. "Suit yourself. You will eventually." I stayed another 40 minutes out of stubbornness. Then I made my excuses, said goodbye to my mum, and walked to my car alone. Behind me, I heard my father's voice carry across the yard. "He'll be back. They always come back when reality hits." I sat in the driver's seat and gripped the steering wheel. I was 30 seconds away from crying, not from sadness, but from the specific exhaustion of being humiliated by the people who were supposed to be on your side. Then my phone lit up on the passenger seat. It was a notification from Raymond Osei, the investor I had been chasing for 4 months. Ready to set up that final meeting. Available this week? Raymond Osei ran a small but serious investment firm that funded early-stage businesses in logistics tech. Exactly what I had been building for 2 years. My company, Bridgepoint, was a freight coordination platform designed for small shipping companies who couldn't afford enterprise software. The idea was solid. The early numbers were real. But I had burned through most of my runway keeping the product alive, and without fresh capital, I had maybe 6 weeks before I had to start making impossible choices. Raymond's email had been sitting in my drafts for 3 months. Every time I thought I was ready to send it, something went wrong. A bug in the platform, a client who pulled out, a month where the numbers looked worse than they should. I kept waiting for the right moment. Then one night I just sent it. No perfect moment. Just sent it. That was 8 weeks ago. And now here was Raymond in my phone asking to meet. I sat in my car outside my dad's house and typed back immediately. Thursday works. Name the time and place. He replied in 4 minutes. Thursday, 11 o'clock, his office in the business district. I drove home with my hands steadier than they had been all night. The humiliation of the party was still sitting in my chest, but underneath it something else was moving. Something quiet and determined. I was not quitting. Not then. Not ever while my father's voice was still in my head saying I was never built to succeed. That night I barely slept. I rebuilt my pitch deck from scratch. I rewrote the financial projections. I practiced answers to every hard question I could imagine Raymond asking. I was ready. Then I woke up Thursday morning to a notification. Callum had posted a photo from the birthday party. It was a group shot. My dad in the middle, Callum and Derek on either side, everyone grinning. The caption read, "Always support the dreamers in the family, even when they're allergic to real work." Loudly crying face, "Happy birthday, Dad. Love you big." The laughing emoji. Aimed directly at me without naming me, which was somehow worse. It gave everyone who knew our family enough information to understand, while giving Callum complete deniability. Within 2 hours, relatives had liked it. Old school friends had commented. My dad had commented, 3 laughing emojis in a row, nothing else. I read the comments on the bus to the business district because my car had failed its service check the previous week and I couldn't afford the repair yet. People I had grown up with were laughing along at a joke they didn't fully understand, aimed at a version of me that existed only in my family's storytelling. I almost replied. I had the words ready. I wanted to say something sharp and true that would make Callum delete the post in embarrassment. Instead, I put my phone in my pocket and stared out the bus window at the city moving past. I had a meeting in 2 hours. One meeting that could change everything. Callum's post would still be there after. My dad's opinions would still be there after. But so would whatever happened in that room with Raymond Osei. I focused on that. The bus dropped me 4 streets from Raymond's office. I walked the rest of the way. I was almost there, mentally running through my opening, when I heard a sound I didn't recognize at first. My phone was buzzing. Then I heard it, a deep mechanical shudder, distant and wrong. Then I realized it wasn't my phone. I looked back down the street. The car I had borrowed from my neighbor as a backup, I had mentioned the meeting to him and he'd offered, was stopped dead in the middle of the road, hazard lights blinking, cars already honking behind it. I ran back. The engine was completely dead. I tried starting it 3 times. Nothing. I had 45 minutes until my meeting. I was 20 minutes on foot from Raymond's office. I called Callum. It went to voicemail on the second ring, which meant he saw my name and declined it. I called Derek. Same thing. I called my dad without much hope. Voicemail immediately. I stood on the pavement next to a dead car, sweat already building under my collar, and I opened the rideshare app on my phone. The surge pricing was brutal. The fare would cost me most of what I had left in my personal account until the following Monday. I booked it anyway. I arrived at Raymond's building 9 minutes late. My shirt had a crease down the front from where I had been clutching my jacket in the car. I had fixed my hair in the lift mirror, but I still looked like someone who had been running. Raymond's assistant showed me in. Raymond Osei was exactly what his LinkedIn suggested. Calm, direct, expensive watch, no wasted words. He looked at me when I walked in and clocked everything. The slight lateness. The stress still visible around my eyes. The way I was working to appear composed. He didn't say anything about it. He just said, "Sit down, Aaron. Walk me through it." So I did. I walked him through Bridgepoint, the platform, the market gap, the traction, the numbers. I had done it so many times in my head that it came out cleanly, even now, even like this. For 20 minutes it was going well. Then Raymond leaned back and asked me a question I had not prepared for. He asked me what I would do if the platform lost its 2 anchor clients simultaneously. It was a stress test question. A scenario question. The kind you answer with a clear, structured contingency plan showing you had thought 3 steps ahead. My mind went completely blank. Not for a second. For a genuine, crushing pause that felt like minutes and was probably 12 seconds. The sleep deprivation, the car, the post, the birthday party, my father's voice, all of it arrived at once in that pause, like a wave I had been outrunning finally catching me. Raymond watched me. He didn't fill the silence. And then I did something I had never done in a business meeting before. I stopped trying to perform composure and just told the truth. I said, I don't have a clean answer to that right now, and I think you deserve to know why. I told him I'd had 2 days of serious personal disruption. I told him I was running the business without a safety net, without family support, and some days without enough sleep to think properly. I told him the honest version of where Bridgepoint stood, the strengths and the real vulnerabilities. I didn't make it emotional. I made it factual. But I didn't pretend. Raymond listened without expression. When I finished, he was quiet for a moment. Then he said, I appreciate that more than you know. The meeting ended with a handshake and a cold, we'll be in touch. I took the bus home. I sat in my flat that evening completely certain I had lost it. Then there was a knock at my door. My mum was standing in the hallway with a container of jollof rice and an expression I had seen only a few times in my life, the one she wore when she had been carrying something heavy for too long. Her name is Yvonne Briggs. She is the quietest person in our family, which in that house meant she had spent 30 years absorbing things she should have spoken aloud. She came in, put the food on my kitchen counter, and sat down at my small table. Then she said she had been at the party. She had heard the bet. I know, I said. It wasn't the first time, she said. They've been saying things like that for years, Aaron. When you left your job to start the company. When the first version failed. At Easter last year. She looked at the table. I should have said something. Every single time. I told her it was okay. She said it wasn't. Then she said she had something for me. She reached into her bag and pulled out a thin folder. Old documents, printed emails, bank receipts. She said she had kept them because something had always felt wrong to her and she hadn't known what to do with them. I opened the folder. The documents were financial records. Transfers from my father's personal account. A signed guarantee letter. A document that appeared to be a deposit payment against Callum's first commercial lease. A payment made when Callum was 26, just starting out, the same age I had been when my father had publicly offered me charity cash at a family dinner. My mother looked at me carefully. There's more, she said quietly. For Derek too. I spent 3 nights going through everything. Callum had received a total of £64,000 from my father between the ages of 25 and 29. Not gifts, loans that had never been repaid, documented in a handwritten ledger my mother had quietly photographed. His first office lease deposit. His first van fleet purchase. A bailout during a bad quarter in year 2, when Callum's logistics business nearly went under. My dad had also used a contact at his former firm to get Callum his first major contract. Derek's history was similar. £41,000 across 5 years, plus a down payment contribution on his first commercial property investment. The property that had made Derek's name in the family as a self-made success. I sat with that number for a long time. £105,000 quietly moved between accounts, while I was mocked at birthday parties for being the one son who couldn't figure it out. I hadn't asked for a single penny. Not when I was starting out. Not when the first version of Bridgepoint failed. Not when I was eating tinned soup for a week because a client payment came in late. The family's entire story, the one where Callum and Derek were proof that Briggs men could succeed, and I was proof that some people simply aren't built for it, had been carefully constructed on a foundation they had been given and I had been denied. They hadn't just doubted me. They had needed me to stay beneath them to make their story work. I closed the folder. I made myself a coffee. And then my phone buzzed with an email from Raymond Osei's firm. The subject line was 4 words, following up, next steps. I opened it standing in my kitchen in my socks, coffee going cold on the counter. Raymond was offering to move forward. Not the full amount I had originally asked for, a smaller first tranche with a structured option for the remainder tied to a 6-month performance milestone. It was careful, measured, and exactly the kind of deal a serious investor makes when they believe in the operator but want to see proof under pressure. It was real money. Enough to hire a second developer, pay off the overdue infrastructure bills, and stabilize Bridgepoint for at least 18 months. I read the email 4 times. Then I sat down on my kitchen floor, not dramatically just because my legs felt suddenly less reliable than usual, and I stayed there for a while. I wanted to call someone. That's the honest truth. I wanted to call my dad and say it happened, it's real, I did it. I wanted Callum to see it. I wanted Derek to know. But I thought about the birthday party. I thought about the post with the laughing emojis. I thought about my father's face when he offered me that envelope of cash in front of 30 people. And I decided, very quietly and very deliberately, to say nothing. I replied to Raymond professionally, confirmed the terms, and scheduled the signing for the following week. Then I went back to work. Meanwhile, my father called Derek and told him I had gone quiet, which apparently worried him more than my failure ever had. 3 weeks after signing with Raymond, my dad called and asked me to come to the house on a Sunday. His voice was unusually measured on the phone, the tone he used when he was managing a situation rather than having a conversation. I went. I don't know why exactly. Maybe I still wanted to believe there was something worth showing up for. I walked into the living room and found Callum and Derek already seated. My dad was standing near the fireplace. There were no drinks, no food, nothing casual about the arrangement. "Sit down, Aaron," my dad said. It was a staged intervention. That was clear within 30 seconds. My father explained, patiently and with what he clearly believed was great generosity, that they were worried about me. He said the business had been going on too long without results. He said it wasn't too late for me to come and work under Callum in a management role. Callum would bring me in at a decent salary, help me rebuild my CV, and give me a proper foundation. Derek nodded along. Callum looked at the carpet with the expression of someone performing reluctant generosity. Then my dad looked at me and said, "Some people just aren't meant to lead, son. There's no shame in knowing your limits." I looked at all three of them. My father, satisfied and certain. Callum, already imagining having me working beneath him. Derek, half interested, half checking his phone. "Okay," I said. "If that's what you think." I stood up, thanked them for the concern and left. Behind me I heard my dad say something to Callum. I didn't catch the words. But I heard Callum's short, uncertain laugh. The kind that happens when something doesn't go quite the way you planned. The next 4 months were the quietest I had ever been. Bridgepoint grew. Not explosively, steadily, which is better. 3 new clients in month 1. A platform update that reduced our processing time by 40%, which became our strongest sales point. A feature in a regional business newsletter that Raymond's team helped arrange. By month 3, our monthly recurring revenue had tripled from where it stood the day I walked into Raymond's office sweating through my collar. I moved into a better flat. Not flashy, just clean, mine with a proper desk and enough room to think. I bought new clothes gradually, the kind you buy when you stop dressing like someone who's one bad month from disaster. I didn't post about any of it. My family, deprived of information, began working with speculation. Derek texted a cousin of mine named Felix asking whether I had sorted things out. My dad apparently told my Aunt Carol that I had probably taken a job somewhere and was too proud to admit it. Callum was the most interesting one. I noticed him checking my LinkedIn profile. The platform tells you when certain connections have viewed your page. He viewed it 4 times in 6 weeks. The 5th time he texted me directly. "Hey, haven't heard from you. Want to grab lunch?" My treat. It had been almost a year since Callum had voluntarily initiated contact with me about anything that wasn't a family obligation. I replied, "Sure." "Thursday?" Callum chose a restaurant significantly nicer than anywhere he had ever suggested we eat before. He was warm in a way that felt like a coat put on too quickly, slightly off, slightly stiff. He asked about my life, my flat, whether I was doing okay. He said he had been thinking about me. He said he hoped things between us could be better. I let him talk. I ordered food and ate it and listened. About 20 minutes in, the real topic arrived. His logistics company was struggling. A large contract had fallen through. He had 3 vehicles sitting idle. He was looking at a difficult quarter and was trying to restructure some costs. Then he said he remembered that I had been doing something in the logistics tech space, and wondered if there was any overlap. Whether I might be open to some kind of arrangement. Whether Bridgepoint had any tools that might help a company his size. He framed it as a potential partnership. 2 brothers building something together. I looked at him across the table. This was the brother who had declined my call when my borrowed car died on the way to the most important meeting of my life. This was the brother who had posted a mocking caption to 30 relatives and laughed along when our father called me a failure. Now he wanted a partnership because he could sense value. I kept my face easy. I said I would think about it. I said almost nothing specific about Bridgepoint. Nothing about the investment, the growth numbers, the new clients. I let him leave the lunch not entirely sure what I was building or how well it was going. That evening I went through my old emails. And I found something that changed everything. 4 years ago, when Bridgepoint was still just an idea in a Google Doc, I had shared an early version of the concept with Callum over email. I had been excited, nervous, and foolish enough to think my older brother might have useful feedback. He had replied with 2 lines, "Sounds risky. Probably not the space to be in right now." That was all I remembered of it. But searching deeper in the thread, I found a forwarded email. Callum had forwarded my concept document. my diagrams, my market analysis, my language, to a business contact of his name Stuart Adler. The covering note said, "Interesting angle I've been thinking about for the logistics market. Wondering if there's something here." He had presented my idea as his own thinking. Not as a serious business proposal, it hadn't gone anywhere, but as intellectual currency, something to sound impressive with in a room full of people he wanted to impress. Including, I discovered from a follow-up thread, my father. He had taken my idea to impress our dad. And our dad had apparently responded, "Interesting. See, Callum thinks strategically. That's the difference." I sat with that for a long time. It wasn't just the theft of the idea that hurt. It was the confirmation of something I had always felt but never been able to prove. They hadn't just underestimated me. They had been afraid of me. And they had spent years keeping me small so they wouldn't have to find out what I was actually capable of. My phone rang. It was my dad. He suggested coffee. A place near his office, neutral ground, just the two of us. I went the following Tuesday. My dad arrived looking slightly less certain than usual, something around the eyes, a posture that had lost a degree of its normal confidence. He was 58 years old and, I noticed for the first time, he looked tired in a way that hadn't been there a year ago. We ordered. He made small talk. Then he cleared his throat and said he wanted to clear the air about the birthday party. For about 45 seconds it sounded like remorse. He said he had been hard on me. He said he sometimes pushed too hard because he wanted to prepare me for a tough world. He said he hadn't always communicated it well. I waited. Then he leaned forward slightly and said, "So, are you actually making money now?" There it was. Not "how are you?" Not "I'm sorry I hurt you." Not "I'm proud of you for keeping going." Just the financial audit, delivered with slightly more politeness than usual because he sensed he needed something from me. He wanted to know if I was valuable yet. He wanted to know if the investment in reconnecting would pay off. I told him things were going well. I didn't tell him how well. He pressed gently, what kind of clients, what kind of revenue was I thinking about expanding? I answered each question with something just vague enough to give him nothing concrete. We finished our coffees. He paid. He hugged me outside, the first time in years. I drove home understanding something very clearly. My father didn't miss me. He missed control over the story. When I got home, my mum called with news. My parents were throwing a party. Not a birthday dinner, something bigger. A 30th anniversary celebration, originally my mum's idea, that my dad had quickly taken over and turned into a grand event. A hired venue, 120 guests, a catered dinner. Extended family from across the country. Business contacts. Church members. The neighborhood. Everyone who made up the audience my father cared most about performing in front of. My mum said my dad was planning to make a speech. She said Callum and Derek were being given a dedicated moment in the evening to be acknowledged. Then she told me the other thing. My dad had called her the day after our coffee meeting. He had said he thought it would be meaningful if I helped with the event coordination, managing the venue communication, the catering confirmation, the timeline on the night. Unpaid, of course, as family. He wanted me there early, working while his successful sons arrived as guests of honor. I was quiet for a moment. Then I said, "Tell him yes." My mum paused. "Aaron?" "Tell him yes," I said again. "I'll be there. I'll help." She heard something in my voice. "What are you planning?" "Something honest," I said. I spent the next 3 weeks preparing the most important presentation of my life. Not a pitch deck this time. The truth. I want to explain what I was building because it matters that you understand it wasn't about humiliation. It was about documentation. I had Raymond's signed investment documents. I had Bridgepoint's current financial statements, real ones independently verified, showing monthly recurring revenue that would make Callum's best quarter look modest. I had the email thread where Callum forwarded my idea to Stuart Adler and framed it as his own strategic thinking. I had the bank records my mother had photographed, 64,000 to Callum, 41,000 to Derek, documented and dated. I had a short video from 3 of Bridgepoint's clients talking about the platform, recorded as testimonials for a pitch I was preparing for a separate opportunity, that happened to include one client saying it had saved his company £30,000 in a single quarter. And I had arranged, with Raymond's knowledge, a short announcement that we had been planning for the right moment. Bridgepoint had been selected for inclusion in a regional business excellence program, an independent recognition of top-performing small businesses under 30 in our county. Not flashy, but real. Independently confirmed. I had a friend named Will Okafor, no relation to Raymond, who worked in Event AV. I asked him to be available on the night to handle a brief presentation on the main screen if needed. I wasn't planning a scene. I was planning to be seen. The only thing I didn't plan for was Callum figuring out something was different. 2 days before the party, Callum called me. He was not warm this time. His voice had the clipped quality it got when he was managing something he didn't fully understand and didn't like the feeling of. He said he had heard I was helping with event coordination and wanted to know why I had suddenly agreed to be so involved. He said it was a bit out of character. He said he hoped I wasn't planning something that would make the night awkward. I told him I was just helping with logistics. He said fair enough, but I could hear the suspicion still running underneath it. Derek called the following day with a slightly different approach. More casual, more studied. He mentioned, as if in passing, that he hoped the night would be drama-free, and that family events weren't really the place for personal statements. He said it with a laugh like it was a joke. I said I completely agreed. He said good. He said he had heard things were going better for me lately and that he was glad. The call ended pleasantly. But I noticed he asked twice in different ways whether I had anything planned for the speech portion. I said I didn't know what he meant. He let it go. That evening my mother called me quietly. "They're nervous," she said. "I know," I said. She was quiet for a moment. Then, "Aaron, whatever you're planning, are you sure?" I thought about that question for a long time before answering. "Yes," I said. "For the first time in a long time, I'm sure." The night before the party, I didn't sleep much. Not from nerves, or not only from nerves. Mostly because the thing I had been keeping carefully managed for months was finally moving close enough to the surface that I couldn't keep it at arm's length anymore. I thought about being 14 and showing my dad a business idea I had written up in a school notebook. A simple thing, a small service idea, nothing remarkable, and him barely glancing at it before saying, "You should focus on your maths." I thought about being 22 and telling him I was leaving my job at the financial services firm to try something of my own. The silence. Then, "Well, don't expect us to bail you out." I thought about all the dinners and Christmas gatherings and Sunday lunches where I had sat at that table feeling like a footnote to my brother's sentences. Where every conversation about success orbited Callum and Derek and I was either absent from it or the punchline. I thought about how many times I had almost believed them. Almost given in. Almost taken Callum's offered job just to stop the feeling of standing alone. I thought about my mother, sitting across from me at my small kitchen table with a folder of photocopied bank records, saying, "I should have said something." Every single time. I let myself grieve it properly just for that night. The relationship I should have had. The father who should have seen me. Then I got up, made coffee and got dressed. I arrived at the venue at 2 in the afternoon to help set up. My dad greeted me at the door with the energy of a man who had 100 things to manage and was grateful to have help, the way you're grateful to have an assistant. "Good you're here," he said. "The catering team needs someone to walk them through the layout and the florist hasn't confirmed the centerpiece colors yet." I handled it. I coordinated the catering, confirmed the table arrangement, managed the AV setup, including, quietly, a brief conversation with Will about the screen and the running order for the evening. Guests began arriving at 6. By 7 the room was full. My dad moved through the space like a man in his element. Loud, generous, performing warmth the way he always did in public. Callum arrived at 6:30 in a new suit, already networking before he had sat down. Derek brought his girlfriend and spent 20 minutes near the entrance making sure the right people saw him arrive. At one point, while I was checking something near the back of the room, my dad passed me carrying a drink for a guest and stopped. "Good work tonight," he said. He clapped me once on the shoulder. "Useful this." One brother, passing behind him, added, "Yeah, don't embarrass the family tonight." They kept moving. I went back to my station and stayed very still for a moment. Because I already knew. In approximately 40 minutes, my father would begin his speech. My dad took the microphone at 8:15. The room settled. 120 people with their dessert plates and their wine glasses and their comfortable expectations of what the next 10 minutes would contain. He spoke well. I'll give him that. He talked about 30 years of marriage, about building a family, about sacrifice and values and the meaning of legacy. He spoke about my mother with a tenderness that was genuine enough to make her cry, and I was glad for her that the night had that in it. Then he pivoted to his sons. He talked about Callum first, the drive, the instincts, the business he had built from nothing. He talked about Derek, the vision, the investments, the financial intelligence. He asked them both to stand and be acknowledged, and the room applauded warmly. Then he looked toward me. "And then there's Aaron," he said. A small smile on his face. A knowing one. The kind he had worn his whole life when the joke was me. Still finding his way. But we love him anyway. A few polite laughs. My Aunt Carol looked at the table. A family friend named Hugh shifted in his seat. My father was already preparing to wrap up. His hand moved slightly, the gesture he used when he was returning to his closing remarks. I stood up. I said, "Dad, could I say something?" The room turned. My father looked at me with an expression that moved through surprise, wariness, and careful management in about 2 seconds. "Of course," he said and held the microphone toward me. I walked to the front of the room and took it. I looked out at 120 people and felt very calm. Not the forced calm of someone holding something down, actual calm. The kind that comes when you are finally about to tell the truth. I said, "I want to thank my father tonight. Genuinely." The room relaxed slightly. My dad's expression softened. "Because," I continued, "if he had ever once treated me the way he treated my brothers, if he had believed in me, backed me, given me the same foundation he gave them, I genuinely don't know if I would have learned to build the way I did." The room went very quiet. I said, "Most of you don't know this, but about 14 months ago at this man's 58th birthday party, he made a bet with my brothers that I would fail within 6 months and come begging for a job. He said, in front of his brothers, his friends, and eventually to my face, that I was never built to succeed." Someone put down a wine glass. The sound was very clear in the silence. I said, "I want to be honest about what that did to me. Not for sympathy, because it doesn't need your sympathy anymore. But because the people in this room who have heard a version of my story that my father told deserve to hear the real one." My dad's jaw tightened. Callum was completely still. "So," I said, "I brought a few things." I nodded to Will at the back of the room. The projector screen behind me came to life. The first slide was simple, the Bridgepoint logo and the words, "Independent Business Excellence Recognition under 30 category confirmed 4 days ago." I heard a murmur move through the room. I said, "Bridgepoint is my freight coordination platform. We now have 22 active clients, monthly recurring revenue that has grown over 300% in the last 8 months, and a confirmed investment partnership that I signed 6 months ago. I am not failing. I have never been closer to failing than my brothers have. I've just been doing it without a safety net." I clicked to the next slide. It showed 2 columns of numbers clearly labeled. These are documented financial transfers from my father's accounts to Callum and Derek over a combined period of 10 years. £105,000 in total. Loans, deposits, introductions, bailouts. All while I was publicly mocked for being unable to manage on my own. Callum stood up. "That's private?" "It's documented," I said. Not angrily. Just factually. I clicked again. The forwarded email, Callum's message to Stuart Adler with my original concept document attached, and the covering note presenting my idea as his own thinking. "And this," I said, "is my brother using my idea to impress our father 4 years ago. When I showed our dad the same concept, he told me to focus on my maths." Callum sat back down. Derek was looking at the table. My father's face was the color of someone who had just understood that the ground they were standing on was not as solid as they believed. "You made a bet," I said. "You bet I'd never succeed. I thought you should know, in front of everyone who heard that version of me, that you lost." I clicked to the final slide. It showed a single paragraph, the announcement I had prepared with Raymond's knowledge. Bridgepoint had been selected as the lead technology partner for a regional freight coordination initiative covering 47 independent logistics operators across 3 counties. The contract value was substantial. The press release was going out the following week. But that wasn't the part that silenced the room. Beneath the announcement was a second paragraph. I read it aloud. "In acknowledgement of the support I did not receive from my family while building this company, Bridgepoint will be funding 3 annual bursaries for first-generation entrepreneurs, people building businesses without family financial backing, mentorship, or inherited contacts. The first bursary recipients will be announced next quarter. The fund is named the Yvonne Briggs Foundation, after the one member of my family who never stopped believing in me." My mother made a sound I had never heard from her before. The room was completely still. My father looked at my mother. My mother was covering her mouth with both hands, tears running down her face, not trying to stop them. Callum said nothing. Derek said nothing. I looked at my father, really looked at him the way I had wanted to for years without the weight of needing his approval sitting on top of it, and I said, "You didn't lose the bet because I got lucky. You lost it because you never knew me." I handed the microphone back to the event host and walked away from the front of the room. I walked through the tables toward the back of the venue. My legs were steady. My hands were steady. I felt very light. Behind me I heard my father's voice, slightly too loud, slightly too controlled. saying something about family matters being kept private. I heard Callum's voice, harder, attempting to reshape what had just happened for the people near him. I heard Derek say something to his girlfriend under his breath. I kept walking. My Aunt Carol caught my arm near the back door. Her eyes were wet. She said, "I liked you at the post in the group chat." I'm so ashamed. I told her it was okay. I meant it. A man named Patrick Briggs, my dad's younger brother, someone who had always sat quietly at family gatherings, stepped in front of me and put his hand on my shoulder and said nothing. Just held it there for a moment. Then nodded once and let me pass. I pushed through the back door into the cool air of the venue's rear courtyard. String lights overhead. The muffled sound of the party continuing inside. I stood there breathing. Not crying. Not exhilarated exactly. Just present in a way I hadn't been in a very long time. I thought the next voice I heard would be Callum's coming to argue. Or my dad's coming to reassert something. Instead, after about a minute, I heard the door open behind me. Soft footsteps. Then a hand on my back. It was my mum. She came and stood beside me without saying anything for a while, the same way she had stood beside me in the kitchen as a child when things were hard and she didn't have the words. Her presence had always been like that, not loud but real. Then she said, "The Yvonne Briggs Foundation." "Yes," I said. She was quiet again. Then, "You didn't have to do that." "I know," I said. She took my hand the way she used to when I was small. 2 days later, my father sent a text. 3 words, "We need to talk." I hadn't replied yet. I wasn't rushing. Callum called that Sunday. He didn't start with an argument. He started with silence, then said quietly, "I didn't know you knew about the email." I said I had known for a while. Another silence. Then he said, "I was jealous of you. Even back then. I think I always was." I didn't know what to do with that except let it exist. Derek sent a message through Felix, "Tell Aaron I'm sorry. Just say that." And other relatives began reaching out. People who had sat in that room for years watching my father's version of me and never questioned it. One by one they said some version of the same thing. I didn't know. I should have asked. But here is what I want you to understand, because this is the part that matters most. None of those messages changed what I had built. None of them were the foundation of anything. I had already built the foundation myself. I looked at my mother's hand in mine and I looked up at the string lights above the courtyard and I understood something I want to say as clearly as I possibly can. The family scapegoat doesn't lose. The family scapegoat learns what no one else in the room is ever forced to learn: how to build something real with no one watching your back. And that knowledge, once you have it, belongs to you completely. Nobody can take a cut of it. Nobody can claim they inspired it. Nobody can post about it with laughing emojis. It is entirely yours. I didn't just win a bet that night. I walked out of that room whole. And for the first time in 29 years, I didn't need a single person in my family to confirm that. What I want you to take from this: not everyone who calls themselves your family is cheering for your growth. Some people need you small to feel tall. If you are the one in your family who is always the punchline, always the cautionary tale, always the one being managed rather than believed in, pay attention. That pattern is information. Build anyway. Document everything. And never mistake cruelty for preparation. The people who bet against you are not your judges. They are simply people who underestimated what you were willing to endure. Endure it. Then show up at their party with receipts. If this story hit you somewhere real, please like it right now, drop a comment below telling me which moment got to you the most, share it with someone who needs to hear it today, and subscribe to this channel because there are more stories coming, honest ones, real ones, and I don't want you to miss a single one.